If it goes right, it's a slice. If it goes left, it's a hook. If it goes straight, it's a miracle. This is Out of Bounds. If it's happening in the world of golf, we're talking about it. Coverage, debate, discussion, pro golf and local golf. Let's do it. This is Out of Bounds. And here are your hosts, Nate Sharman and Josh Durso.
All right, welcome to the Out of Bounds podcast. Josh Durso and Nate Sharman here, breaking down the biggest golf news of the week. The Memorial Tournament is in the books. Nate, man, you were there, actually out in the wild. What was that like? Did it have the energy of a major? Because that was definitely what we kept seeing and hearing during the broadcast on CBS.
Oh man, what a loaded question. But first, great trip out to Columbus. Stayed with my cousin Lucas. So shout out Lucas for having me over there too. Got to see Teddy as well. So great time out there in Dublin. Columbus is a great city. We spent a lot of time at Bridge Park, which is right outside Dublin, which was really fun too. A lot of live music on Friday and Saturday nights. Few adult beverages later, all the fun stuff, right? So, but yeah, going back to the majors question with that tournament, with elevated events and stuff like that, more events are high profile, right? And then you throw in the Memorial being at Jack Nicklaus's course. He's from Columbus, Ohio. He went to Ohio State. He's lived on the golf course for a number of years, moved around houses a couple times. So that, in terms of all the elevated events, that's one of the bigger ones, right? We have a few that we pick out. Arnold Palmer's event, the Players is larger than the elevated events too, with a bigger purse. So, but as in terms of those elevated events, it's pretty big. But I don't think it really had the major feel to me, right? I had the benefit of, we both had the benefit, right, of going to the PGA Championship at Oak Hill in 3 weeks ago, right? And then I got to go to the Memorial just 2 weeks later. And it definitely wasn't in terms of buzz. There's just not that major championship buzz there, right? Especially on Sunday when I was there. I mean, there was a huge buzz, but it's nothing like it was at Oak Hill. And I think a big reason for that is just the way the golf course is set up, and it's totally different than Oak Hill. And that's not a bad thing or a good thing. Just the way that the golf course at Muirfield Village is set up is it's a village, right? I mean, there's a million houses that are just outstanding. Urban Meyer's house is incredible. Jack Nicklaus's house is incredible too. So it's just, there's not a lot of like congestion of fans, right? They're all spread out through the golf course, seeing their different holes. So it's a little bit different in that regard, right? You hear a lot of different roars at the PGA Championship because you're at a green somewhere and you can turn around and see another green or a fairway or a tee box, right? That doesn't really happen as much at Muirfield Village. There's a few real areas you can do that. But yeah, that was probably the main contributing factor. Also, on Saturday, it was, 90 degrees, right? And blazing sunny. So it's just going to be a little bit quieter with that regard. Sunday was a little bit cooler in the 80s. But I think the heat definitely plays a factor in that. But in my opinion, I don't think it had the major buzz like they were kind of talking about. But that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, I think that might also be a little optimism on behalf of the PGA Tour, hoping that some of these elevated events, especially Arnie, Jack's, Tigers tournaments, which are elevated, become major like in the future.
Right.
But
it has its own little special place, right? It doesn't need to be a major. It's got this is Jack Nicklaus's tournament. This is Jack's place. And it's so highly regarded from the players, looking at some of the videos of players coming off the 18th green and shaking Mr. Nicklaus's hand and just seeing how much it genuinely means to them. These players aren't putting on a face to show how important this event is. It generally, they grew up and, earlier in their life, learning about golf history through Jack Nicklaus and kind of, even Viktor Hovland from Norway, grew up through Jack Nicklaus. So it's just cool how important that is. But I'm okay with it not being a major, right? It's got its own special place in golf, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Agreed. All right. It is time for this week's Fast Five. And we start with Viktor Hovland, who got a big victory at Jack's Place, outlasting Denny McCarthy in a playoff. That's his fifth career win and certainly will make him a favorite heading into the U.S. Open.
What a season for Viktor Hovland so far. He had that really, really good finish at the Masters, played really well, and then had some tough times down the stretch. The same thing kind of happened at the PGA Championship. So we know this is a guy that can win golf tournaments, right? He hasn't had the most success over here on the PGA Tour. He's had some wins, obviously, but he still has, tried to break through in some of these bigger tournaments. He finally does it here in Memorial, wins in the playoff against Denny McCarthy. So great for Hovland to get that done, and a well-deserved victory for him. He played very well coming down the stretch on Sunday.
Absolutely.
Rose Zhang, we talked about her last week, right? Over on the LPGA Tour this weekend, gets a win at the Mizuno Americas Tournament at Liberty National in New Jersey. She goes pro last week, right? Has an illustrious career at Stanford University, wins 2 championships there. And at the individual sense, goes pro, gets in on sponsors exemption, wins the event. Her first time out there in a playoff too. She handles the stress through the playoff. Was a long round, as we saw, right? As it ended way after the Memorial too. We'll talk about the pace of play issues there a little bit later, but really good job by Rose Zhang, able to grab that victory and on a professional level. And the hype is there, Josh, right? We talked about this player being, very highly touted, getting comparisons from Tiger Woods, especially because they're both Stanford athletes. So, she takes that pressure and internalizes it, right? And goes and wins the event. Pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to save some of my thoughts for later in the show on Rose Zhang's performance, but suffice to say, she lived up to the hype. Stephen Ames wins the Principal Charity Classic, finishing 17 under par. He was 1 stroke clear of Steve Stricker and Jerry Kelly. That's on the Champions Tour. A big win for Stephen Ames, and obviously a little bit of a rivalry, I think, setting up there with Steve Stricker coming up into the ranks. And now having to duel with guys like Stephen Ames on a week in, week out basis. Yeah,
and think about it too. Like Stuart Sink wasn't playing, right? Because he's at the PGA Champion or at the Memorial, excuse me. So there's a couple of guys out there that weren't playing, of course, but you're seeing Steve Stricker's name, and I don't think that's a name you're going to stop seeing anytime soon. Let's flip over to the Corn Ferry Tour. We're at the Rex Hospital Open in Raleigh this past weekend. George Fernandez Valdez gets the victory there, earns his first victory in about 79 starts on the Corn Ferry Tour. Hopefully we'll be seeing him next year on the PGA Tour as he tries to accumulate enough points to get his tour card. So just really good job by George, able to grab that victory. He also did it in a playoff too. So a lot of playoffs happening on the PGA Tour in the golf
we had
this week. So pretty cool to see.
3 playoffs in 4 tour events, and obviously we don't have any live golf to talk about this week, so we're going to wrap it up with the one player that live loves to hate, Rory McIlroy, whose putting performance on Sunday was nothing short of abysmal, ranking 65th in the field. He shot a 75 and played himself right out of contention, carding 6 bogeys between the 5th and the 14th holes in the final round. And that actually transitions perfectly to our 5 questions segment. Nate, the entire golf world at this point is, I think, dazed after his performance this past weekend. He had the 54-hole, a share of the 54-hole lead. There's been a ton of debate about the reason. And, of course, CBS cameras caught Jack and Rory's exchange where the legend said he wants to sit down and talk with the former world number 1 soon privately. The question, I guess, here is, where is Rory right now? Can he get it back together this season? Is it possible?
Oh, man, I hope. It's just crazy because, Rory was playing, poorly, right, about 2 months ago around the misses the cut at the Masters, skips out of the RBC Heritage, then eventually gets back to the PGA Championship, finishes well there, plays not winning golf, right, but still hangs around, which is something you need to do in the majors. At the Memorial, he plays really well on Thursday, makes a triple bogey on 18 to finish even par that day, then plays pretty solid Friday, Saturday, gets himself into a share of the lead, right, going into that day. And you got to think, right, this is Rory's day. I mean, Rory's been incredible at the Memorial, right? He has a great track record there. So I was very surprised to see him play that poorly on Sunday. Coming through that front 9, I think he played a 1 over. He gets on the par 5 11th. That's kind of where we chose to kind of hang out for the day. It's a really cool par 5, dog leg left, and they hit driver most of the time. So it's really, really cool landing area. And Rory absolutely pummeled one. I think he hit it right about 380 yards. And he was way up there. He hit about, 6 iron into a par 5. Makes birdie, gets back to even on the day, and then I think he made 3 bogeys in a row after that and just puts himself out of the tournament. Missed a couple really short putts. Really sad to see a guy like Rory, and quite frankly, a little bit embarrassing, right, for Rory to kind of go out like that, because he's faced a lot of criticism for good reason lately of just not being able to kind of close, right? I mean, not necessarily did he have the lead there. Denny McCarthy had the lead most of the day, but still Rory was a guy that, he was the favorite after Saturday and the favorite a lot of the day on Sunday morning too. So I'm hoping that he can get it back. Josh, I'd love to hear what you have to think about, Rory kind of being able to find that. If you listen to him in press conferences, he seems like he's getting his head in the right place, not talking about live as much, right? And just kind of going back to the basics a little bit. So here's to hoping that Rory can get it back. But golf is such a hard spot. We saw with Billy Horschel. If your confidence gets low, it can be a real toll on the body. So let's hope Rory gets it back.
Yeah, you know what? I kept going back to this morning and this afternoon when I had some time to stop and think about everything, not so much in the moment, but kind of reflecting on how he played and some of the chatter that happened afterward. I kept thinking about what he said. I think it was fairly recently, like maybe a month ago, when he came back off of that week off where it was an elevated event and he basically took the multi-million-dollar hit. Right. And he said something to the effect of, if I never won again, I would be completely happy with my life.
Yeah. And he talked about that at the PGA. Yeah.
So part of me wonders how much he's really in it. Like, he's there. He's physically there. And I think he knows that even if he did say it after the PGA, that he can contend without his best stuff. Like, he's good enough to do that. Mm-hmm. But I genuinely wonder at this point how much he wants to be on Scottie Scheffler and Jon Rahm's level at this point. Like, they are the two most dominant golfers in the game right now.
But Koepka in that
Brooks Koepka too,
that level
as well.
too, I would say.
And I guess you could probably lump up a few other guys in there as well. Guys who just, they want it really bad. They're hungry. They really care. Maybe it's age. Maybe it's a thing where, Roy's just at a point in his career now where he's the one, like Brooks a few years ago, who took a bunch of heat for saying, I really only care about the majors and I don't really care about anything else. Maybe that's where Rory is right now. To me, it doesn't seem like he can get it back this year. It almost feels too far gone. What he did Sunday wasn't just an inability to close. That was clearly someone who lost their game, had no confidence to the point you made, and didn't really know where to go. Like, we always talk about how when the greats are missing a component of their game, they fall back onto other components of their game. Rory had nothing to fall back onto. Wheels came off the bus entirely. He was making a mess around the greens. He was hitting iron shots offline. His T-ball was not that great. You just can't get through these packed fields like that. You're going to lose every time. It's just not, I hope, for the sake of the PGA Tour, I hope he gets it back, because obviously incredibly popular player. And who knows, maybe he's closer than any of us realize to getting it back. But right now, man, after seeing what I saw on Sunday, that is a golfer who is in a very strange place. Very strange place.
Yeah, and we got to talk about what Phil had to say about him, right? Phil had a little bit of the Twitter fingers the last couple of days. He's even had a couple good ones, today on Monday, right? And Phil on Saturday night, I think it was about midnight or maybe even later. So if I had to guess, Phil might have got into the wine a little bit that night. But he kind of talked about how no live team would want Rory McIlroy. That was I'm paraphrasing his tweet, right? But that's just kind of wild to say. And there's 0% of it that's true, right? I think they tried to throw the bag at Rory, as they did with pretty much everybody, right? And to go no avail to Rory stayed on the PGA Tour, obviously. But I think that's a little bit crazy for Phil to say. I mean, Phil's said some crazy stuff in the past too, and he will continue to do that. But I don't know what Phil had to gain by saying that. I don't know.
Yeah, he's just chirping, right? Yeah. Like, that's pretty much all that is. because of where Rory's game is right now, it almost feels even more unnecessary
Right.
for Phil to be saying this. Like, okay, Phil, if you're happy and you're satisfied with the decision you made to go play at Live, just be happy with that and live your life. Right.
Phil was making fun of Hideki Matsuyama today. I'm not sure if you saw it on Monday. Someone took a picture of Hideki in an airport. He was flying standby for Spirit. And the jokes write themselves there, right? And right. Phil made a remark about the high flyers would never do that, which is a Live team. And it's I don't know that you can't help but laugh a little bit at that one. I don't think that one's as serious as the Rory one, probably, but still, Phil, like I said, has Twitter fingers, right? It's something you would think out of like a middle schooler going through life in school, having these Twitter fingers and being able to say stuff, behind a wall, right, behind a phone and stuff. But just really interesting stuff from Phil, and I hope we continue to get it, and I'm sure we will.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to stop. The only thing I'm going to say, and this kind of links back to what we were talking about with Rory, I've said it over and over. I think this entire situation, the last 12 months, plays out completely differently if Rory doesn't have to be the de facto commissioner of the PGA Tour. Speaking on behalf of the players and speaking on behalf of the tour and doing the stuff that, frankly, Jay Monahan should have been doing. It's
mentally exhausted him, and he might, like you said, Josh, he might lose the season because of it.
Well, and, frankly, even bigger than that, he could lose interest, period, in it. Like, that's exhausting on a completely different scale than I think most people understand. He was fighting for the actual existence of the PGA Tour. That's an incredibly heavy weight to have on your shoulders, and to also try and be one of the 2 or 3 best golfers on the planet. It's just a lot. Speaking of one of the 2 or 3 best golfers on the planet, Scottie Scheffler, once again, led the field in strokes gained off the tee, approach to the green, around the green, and tee to green. Overall, he was number 3 in strokes gained, lagged heavily in putting. But again, the guy is just a statistical freak. What do we make of what Scheffler is doing, and how impressive is it week in and week out?
Yep. Like you said, I want to reiterate it because it's so crazy. At the Memorial, first in strokes gained off the tee, first in strokes gained approach with his wedges, first in strokes gained around chipping, dead last, 65th in putting. I think he lost at least 8 strokes on the field for putting. And this is a guy that came in second and third because of Denny McCarthy's playoff, came in third, almost had a chance to win the golf tournament. One shot back. He finished at 6 under par.
It's that bogey.
Right.
On 17.
He makes that bogey late. He played not very well on Thursday and Friday, and really played pretty well on Saturday morning, and then obviously played really well on Saturday, I should say, and then played well on Sunday too to get himself in that position. But one thing that I thought was interesting, Josh, was his press conference afterwards, and they were kind of talking about that, and he doesn't really seem like angry or mad about it. He's just kind of like, seems to be like kind of your average, this putts are going to drop. That's something we think of as amateur golfers, right? I'm putting a good stroke on it and it's just not dropping, which is not something you hear a ton from a pro, but it certainly is golf, right? Putts will eventually start dropping for you. And Scotty doesn't seem like he's going to change a whole ton about his putting stroke. And, and with his approach to putting too as well, he's just hoping that it kind of comes around, and I think it will. I think that's a good strategy.
Yeah. And that presser, I listened to a bit of it this morning. He said he was exhausted. He's played 4 straight weeks. It's a lot for somebody who's playing at the level that he's playing. We saw Rahm kind of have that stretch back around the Masters and heading into Hilton Head, where, it wears on them. But, Scheffler's putting on a statistical show, and frankly, one that we haven't seen.
Some of the better numbers are better than Tiger
in years, literally better. And we're so quick to judge overall success, right, on wins and losses. More importantly, how many wins have you acquired? But just looking at wins does not paint a complete picture of how dominant Scheffler has been over basically the last 20-ish starts. It's incredible. It's something that, like, if he winds up with, by the end of this season, say he winds up getting some of these putts to drop, and he just, it's funny, had he just putted average this past weekend, he probably wins by 2 or 3 strokes.
Yeah.
Right.
If he doesn't putt dead last in the field.
Yeah. If everything continues forward for Scheffler as we're seeing it, and he does start to get the ball rolling, and say he wins 2 or 3 more times before the end of the year, given what he has accomplished, it will be one of the most statistically impressive seasons ever.
He's on a 15 straight 12 places or better finishes this year on the PGA Tour.
It's incredible. Top 12 or better.
12 or
15
better.
Straight events. It's insane. It's
the run he's
insane.
just on it is incredible. I think the PGA Tour and some of those other guys are kind of hoping that Sky doesn't figure out the putter, because if he does, boy, watch out. They're going to continue to dominate. Let's go back to Sunday, and we'll talk about, Denny McCarthy and Viktor Hovland, and who you think, Josh, gains more from this weekend's performance. Denny McCarthy, kind of having the lead all day Sunday and, straggling in on 18, making the bogey and then the bogey again in the playoff to lose, or Viktor Hovland really playing well towards the end and getting that victory.
I am sensing a disagreement here.
Just with the way I prefaced it, right?
I think this is a bigger weekend for McCarthy. Adversity builds character, right? My big takeaway from this is, like, this was not unexpected of Hovland to get a win. Like, frankly, this is overdue. He's been hanging around for weeks, literally weeks. He's just been lurking in the top 5 on Sundays, waiting to basically be in the right position at the right time to capture a win. He did that. It wasn't unexpected. I think what happened to Denny McCarthy is the combination of unexpected and the right learning experience on a pretty big stage, basically the biggest stage you could be on, short of maybe the Players or a major. So sure. I think, he played some of the most consistent golf of anybody in the field. I mean, I think he had, before that bogey on 18, it was 20,
all pars in the back,
28 straight holes without anything worse than a par. I mean, that's some consistent golf. That means you can do it. Will he do it? Now, that's a different question, and that's a different debate for another day. I'm not going to go there. But I think as far as what this weekend could mean to both players, like Viktor Hovland's out there looping for his buddy in a U.S. Open qualifier today. Like, this win yesterday clearly didn't change his life much.
Right.
So I think for McCarthy, this can be something very impactful long-term. What do you think?
I want to preface this with, I'm a big Denny McCarthy fan. I know him on the Corn Ferry Tour as he built up through there. I've had him in some DFS lineups this year, so I've been following him so much. At the PGA Championship, I think I might have watched him or Bo Hostler the most out of all the golfers, right? Especially at the range. We both found ourselves on Denny McCarthy, watched him strike 4 irons, right? So Denny McCarthy is the guy that that I like, So watching Hovland, though, I just think this is such a big spot for him, because we mentioned this is his 4th PGA Tour victory. It's his first one in the States. He's won twice in Mayakoba and one other time at Puerto Rico. That's right. Yeah, no, once in Mayakoba and twice in Puerto Rico. Excuse me. He's able to get his first, big victory stateside, right? And this adversity builds character thing that you said, I think you could say that for Hovland too, right? He buries a bunker shot in the bunker on 17 at Oak Hill. He has 16, at Oak Hill, has a chance to win the PGA and the Masters, doesn't, has to compartmentalize that and kind of build it in and feed the adversity builds character moment. So I just think this is really big for Viktor Hovland to get that win, because he's just been so close and he finally breaks through, and now the floodgates could open for a guy like Viktor Hovland. You could see him, competing at the U.S. Open here in a few weeks in L.A. So I think it's bigger for Viktor Hovland for that reason. Another reason for that sways me against Denny McCarthy is it's just so hard to get back in the position what Denny McCarthy had. He had a 2-shot lead most of that day. Getting a 2-shot lead in an elevated event is really, really challenging for anybody, right? Not just Denny McCarthy. So I'm going to be hard pressed. I'd love to see him prove me wrong. I hope he does. To see Denny get in a position to win a high profile PGA Tour event like he just was again, because that's just so challenging. But prove me wrong, Denny. I'd love to see it.
Yes, I would agree with that. He handled, I will say this before we end on that.
He had some huge up and downs towards the end and almost got up and down on 18 for the win.
Yeah. And also I'm thinking, afterward, of course, CBS, they shoved a mic right in his face, right as he's walking off, and asked him, asked the question I think is borderline silly to ask the guy who just lost, how are you feeling? What is it like? He said he felt heartbroken.
I felt heartbroken in the crowd. I'll tell you that. But
he handled it so magnificently that I think you can't help but root for him moving forward. I think he gained an absolute ton of fans from this past weekend. So hey, we'll see what happens. Biggest golf story of the weekend by far, Rose Zhang winning her debut on the LPGA Tour. She appears to be a force to be reckoned with here. So bring on the age-old question. What's better for golf? Single player dominance like we saw during the Tiger era, which of course we've already mentioned the comparisons, or highly competitive deep fields like what we see now on the PGA Tour, where we have flashes of dominance a la Jon Rahm or Scottie Scheffler, but nothing to the effect of what Tiger did late 90s, early 2000s.
It's single player dominance, and I think we both agree on that, right? I mean, people tune in for Tiger Woods if he's playing and he's in 47th place and has no chance to win. The TV numbers are astronomically different when Tiger Woods is in the picture, no matter how he's playing. He can be, struggling and limping and, making his way throughout the golf course, and Jon Rahm's beating him by 15, and more people are watching than if Jon Rahm, Scottie Scheffler, and Brooks Koepka are tied on the 18th hole at LA Country Club, to try to win the US Open. There's going to be more people watching Tiger, and maybe Tiger playing with his son at the PNC Championship, right? More people are probably going to watch that. So that's definitely better for the game aspect, right? Of trying to grow the game and get more eyes on them. Definitely better to have one single player dominance, a player that you can really resonate with, right? Rose Zhang gained a lot of fans, and I would be hard pressed to say that she didn't get thousands upon thousands of Instagram followers, TikTok followers in the last week since she's gone pro and now won on the LPGA Tour.
Yeah, it's huge. Dominant sells, doubling down on that big time. I think it's great for the LPGA Tour, and I think it's good for golf in general.
Definitely.
Like we're seeing what deep, it's almost like it's nice to have both things going on at the same time. Like on one hand, the PGA Tour has, I guess you'd say deeper fields with more congestion at the top. And what you have potentially on the LPGA side is a single player who can stand out and dominate the way Tiger Woods did, 20 years ago. To have both of those things going at the same time, potentially over the next several years, with whatever LIV is going to do as well, does put golf in a very, very good position in terms of game growth overall.
That's for sure.
There's just, there's no doubt.
What doesn't put golf in a good position though, and it relates to this topic, right, is pace of play. And it was really slow for that LPGA tournament. I think it took about 6 hours for Rose Zhang to finish her round. And Dan Rappaport reported that she waited every single shot. And that just shows Rose Zhang's character, by the way, to win that event after having to wait on every shot in her first event. So I want to talk about pace of play as it results to the PGA Tour. Just by being I've been a media member at the PGA Championship, and now I was a spectator at Murphy Village, and this is kind of what I've gone to think. At the PGA Championship, pace of play was great. I mean, they played relatively on the faster side than normal. And at Murfield Village, I don't know the exact statistics, but it seemed like they're fine. I was, driving on Friday to Columbus and listening to PGA Tour radio, and they had a group on the clock, which they don't do a ton. I mean, they don't ever really penalize players for slow play. And I don't even really hear a lot of groups on the clock. So it's nice to see that the PGA Tour is going to maybe use that and utilize that in their favor. But going back to the pace of play at the PGA Championship, I think that the pace of play there was so good because they let them use rangefinders. that tournament is run by the PGA of America, not the tour. So they're able to use rangefinders when they're not able to use them on the tour. So it just cuts down so much time because these players are able to get the rangefinder in their hand way before they get up to the ball. A caddy gets out of the bag, hands it to them, and then it's just part of their routine, right? They go up to the ball, whether it's the caddy or the player, usually it's the player, shoots the green, shoots the bunker short, knows their numbers and where they got to be, and then boom, they're in the golf ball. It makes so much sense. Why not use technology that we have to try to speed up our game? I don't understand the cons against it. In my mind, they don't really make that much sense.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I don't think rangefinders or technology necessarily go far enough to fixing it. I think at the end of the day, it's still an enforcement issue. And
it's a Band-Aid. It's not a fix, that's for sure.
Yeah, like the PGA Tour just basically has to be the bad guy and, penalize guys, fine guys, whatever you want to do. Maybe you want to take strokes out of the equation. Maybe you start with finding guys.
Sure. Yeah.
Slowest groups, if they're over a certain threshold for speed, you find X amount of, I don't know. But clearly to your point, pace of play is still very much an issue. 5.5, 6 hour final round for anyone, including the person who actually wins the golf tournament, is absolutely unacceptable. It just can't happen. Worse to me than the viewing experience, which obviously sucks at that point, right? Like nobody's enjoying watching a 5.5 or 6 hour round of golf on television.
No one has no one has that time either. No one can sit down and watch 6 hour round.
Setting a horrific example for people who then go out and play golf with their friends. They're watching things and they're absorbing habits that are not good, especially when we're hearing people, like when we're having it actually like verbally reinforced. Oh, this round took 5.5 hours. Oh, this round took 5 hours and 45 minutes. Oh, this was a 6 hour round of golf. No, it's bad for golf. It's bad for every part of golf. I
agree with you, Josh. Yeah, definitely. But I think on the PGA Tour side, I think it's getting a little bit better. I really do. And I think PGA Tour can be strategic with their enforcement of rules. Start by putting players on the clock now, and maybe I kind of don't necessarily hate that finding plan too. I think that might need some tuning, but they can finally figure out a spot for there. And I think with the pressure of LIV easily being lifted, I think that's going to help. I think they were scared about as Brooks would say, stroking players, right? With the thought of LIV being around, because players could get really pissed off that they got a 2-stroke penalty for maybe something they didn't do if another player was involved with it. If they got stroked against, then I think they could get scared that the player could go to LIV. So with LIV kind of in the next few years, I'm saying more so kind of getting out of the picture in terms of stealing PGA Tour players, they might be able to get back to that. Let's hope we see it, because it needs to happen eventually.
Yeah, we can talk about that on a future episode. I think that warrants talking about, because I think it's over with already. I think the days of watching LIV poach other players from other tours, especially the PGA Tour, I think it's pretty much over with. Wednesday show. What are we going to be doing on the Wednesday show, Nate?
We keep marching on the PGA Tour. We'll talk about as the players head up to our neighbors to the north, up in Canada for the RBC Canadian Open preview, and also today, Monday, longest day in golf. So many good U.S. Open qualifier stories with former or past PGA Tour winners. You have, young and upcoming players that play well at these events too, and some other storylines in between. Monday Q Info did a nice job today, kind of explaining it all, and had a great live show with Mark Baldwin too, who was a professional golf player too as well. So I was watching that show a little bit before we got on here. So shout out to him. He does a great job kind of explaining that. But we'll have some of the better stories on our episode on Wednesday to kind of help go through those, because they're really fun and some are really heartwarming to see too as well.
Awesome stuff. And reminds everybody of just how much work actually goes into getting from the street to LA Country Club. It turns out it's not just play one good round of golf and you're there. Hey, that is going to do it for this edition of Out of Bounds. We'll be back on Wednesday with a preview of the RBC Canadian Open. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and subscribe here on YouTube for the latest golf news, new podcast episodes, and plenty of other content. Remember, whether it's down the middle or out of bounds, keep on swinging.
You've been listening to Out of Bounds. If it's coverage, debate, or discussion of pro and local golf, we'll be talking about it. Be sure to visit the website. Find us on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. See you next time on Out of Bounds.